I bleed orange.
There was just something that you just knew you were in the right place.
Let's go! You want your ball game tonight? They're killing me, Whitey. They're killing me.
The fans respond. Listen to this crowd. The miracle has happened. The Broncos are going to the Super Bowl.
As the first choice in the draft, quarterback John Elway of Stanford.
Snap to Elway. The look, the throw. Touchdown to Mark Jackson. 98.5-yard drive. You want to tell me the 37-year-old man doesn't want to win this game? Yeah, no, man. That sacrifice. Oh, man.
That's the old John Elway that's been doing it for 100 years. He saw that goal line and he went for it.
John Elway on target to be the game's most valuable player.
Yeah!
That almost gives you a feeling that maybe this is his last game for the Denver Broncos.
I love you!
The Denver Broncos are one of the NFL's most successful franchises, with only 5 losing seasons since 1973 and 36 consecutive years of home game sellouts. In 2001, the Broncos moved into a new home in Vesco Field at Mile High. To appreciate how far the Broncos have come, one need only look back to their humble beginnings. The Broncos were born in 1960 as part of the upstart American Football League. In the very first AFL game, they beat the Boston Patriots 13-10. But the Broncos were the AFL's weakest franchise, and it would be over a decade before they began to fulfill the promise of that early win. Unlike other AFL owners, the Broncos founder, Bob Howsam, was not a wealthy man.
Here in Denver, we had a stadium, and we were hoping to enlarge it because we were talking about the Continental Baseball League at that time, and so it fit right in. I wanted a football team here for the fans because I thought we had great fans. I needed 35,000 seats to first enter baseball, and secondly, we thought we could draw that many in football in time. We built what is called the South Stands today. That's where our Roughnecks and the Broncos are, and of course we bought 11,000-seat bleacher section to put in. Our offices, when we started, quite frankly, was a Quonset hut, just like the Marines would have had it.
Howsam sold the team after the 1960 season, but the Quonset hut was Broncos headquarters for another 6 years. Denver's first head coach was Frank Filchuk. His approach to practice was almost as primitive as the team's facilities.
His big thing in practice was, let's play a touch football game. And he'd play this game by like for 2 hours straight. And that's what he considered his practice sessions, you say.
In those years before the AFL-NFL merger, the impoverished Broncos had trouble signing quality players. Veteran quarterback Frank Trapuka joined the team as an assistant coach, but he came out of retirement when Filchuk needed help in the 1960 exhibition opener.
Dublinsky and George Herring were the quarterbacks, and they're not doing anything. So at halftime, Filchuk says to me, you're in shape. Why don't you get dressed and go out and give the people some of their money's worth? He says, throw a few passes, at least they'll enjoy it. So I did that, and 4 years later, I was still with the Broncos.
The dearth of quality went far beyond the quarterback position. The team was so strapped that, for 2 years, they dressed in used uniforms and clearance sale socks, lest anyone mistake Denver's lowly status.
They were the ugliest looking things you ever wanted to see. And of course, I believe he probably got them used from some high school team because the sizes were very small. I had to cut the armpits in order to be able to put the jerseys on top of my shoulder pads in order to raise my arm up.
When Jack Faulkner became head coach and general manager, he ordered the hated socks destroyed in a pre-game ceremony.
They took and they piled up all the old uniforms in a big pile, including the socks, and they circled the field with torches. And then they went over to the pile of old uniforms and dropped the torches into the pile of old uniforms, and those old uniforms burned, and that was the end of them.
I still have a pair because I stole them from before they could burn them. So I still have a pair of those old vertical striped socks.
The orange and blue may be Jack Faulkner's most lasting contribution to the Broncos, but Lionel Taylor was a legacy of Frank Filchuk. The unheralded receiver showed up at Broncos practice in Week 3 of the 1960 season.
We were playing one of Frank Filchuk's touch football games instead of practicing, running pass patterns. And all of a sudden, Lionel makes a couple of one-handed grabs. So all of a sudden, Filchuk sees this and he stops practice. And all of a sudden, we're running a few pass patterns to see whether this guy is for real or whether he can only do this in a touch football game.
Taylor signed and started that week and quickly established himself as the Broncos' best offensive player of the AFL era. He led the AFL in receptions in 5 of the league's first 6 years, and his franchise records for receptions and receiving yards stood until 1999.
First guy to catch over 100 passes. Of course, in those days, we threw practically every play, and but Lionel could catch the ball. If he had one drawback, it was the speed. Didn't have that breakaway speed that you look in receivers today. But you put the ball any place near him, he was going to catch it. There's no question about it.
With too few players like Taylor and Trapuka, the Broncos weren't really competitive in the 1960s, but they often put on a good show, and Denver fans were beginning to take notice. In the preseason of 1967, the Broncos finally left the old Quonset hut behind. New head coach Lou Saban had insisted on better accommodations for the team.
Lou reorganized the football operation. He also told Jerry Phipps that they needed a practice facility. If we're going to be a first-class organization, we've got to have facilities that match what other organizations have.
We didn't even have a practice field. We built this thing up in conjunction with the fans of this area who contributed largely to the operation over the past 3 years. The people in this area have really supported the Broncos, but we also knew that eventually we had to win. They just wouldn't accept losing, which they've been doing for 10 years.
Saban had won 2 AFL titles in Buffalo, but to win at all in Denver, he would need better players. He scored an immediate coup by signing his #1 draft pick, Syracuse running back Floyd Little. Before Little, no top draft pick had ever signed with Denver. One of the most popular players in team history, Little was the engine that drove the Broncos offense for 9 years.
I don't consider myself a power runner. I think I rely on speed, elusiveness, quickness. Actually, I run as fast as necessary, and I don't try to run over anybody. I just try and run around as many people as I can.
But '67 was also a year of crisis for the Broncos. Denver voters rejected a stadium bond issue, and supporters rallied to save the team.
When the Broncos was on the verge of moving, my first year, they were going to sell them to some people in Chicago or Birmingham, We went on this caravan. We went through all the local towns around us, as far as Albuquerque, New Mexico, and up to Rapid City, South Dakota. And we just put together a fan base to rally around and keep the Broncos in Denver. People start wearing orange. They had Orange Sunday, and they start wearing orange hair and then striped hair, and then it just became a place where people really showed their support by virtue of what they wore.
By 1968, enough money had been raised through private contributions to add an upper deck to the west stands. This brought the total capacity to 50,000 seats, the minimum required by the AFL-NFL merger. The Broncos' biggest crowd pleaser of 1968 was rookie Marlon Briscoe. A quarterback in college, Briscoe was only 5'9", so the Broncos moved him to the defensive secondary. But in the home opener, Lou Saban ran out of quarterbacks. Briscoe got the call and became the AFL's first black quarterback. Entering the game with 9:52 left to play and the Patriots leading, Briscoe rallied the Broncos and fell just short of a comeback win.
He came out and he made some great moves and could run. That's another factor. He was a fine ball carrier once he got into the open, and we almost pulled that game out of the fire.
The crowd went crazy. Time ran out, we lost the game. But we came back with like 10 points in one quarter. And so the next game, there was like 30,000 more fans, some ungodly amount of attendance.
Well, they knew one thing, it was going to become exciting. One thing about Marlon, he was going to be all over the place, and the fans were excited themselves. As far as being black, white, or pink, or blue, it didn't make any difference. Here was a talent. They could electrify the fans, and the team itself that surrounded him enjoyed seeing him do the things that he was doing.
I still have the record for the most touchdown passes by a Denver Bronco rookie, even over John Elway, and it still stands today. I threw 14 touchdown passes, something of that nature. That record still stands, and I'm kind of proud of that.
Briscoe left the Broncos after the '68 season and became a starting receiver with the Bills and Dolphins. But his brief career as the Broncos quarterback was a landmark that helped redefine the position. During his tenure, Saban laid the groundwork for Denver's enduring tradition of dominating defense, adding legendary defenders like safety Billy Thompson, tackle Paul Smith, and ends Lyle Alzado and Rich Tombstone Jackson. In 1969, Saban's defense produced the Broncos' first ever shutout in a game that became notorious for a scoreboard stunt.
Those days, we didn't beat a lot of people, let alone shut anybody out. Well, that particular day, we played very, very well against the San Diego Chargers.
Final score, Broncos 13, Hot Dogs nothing.
I think they still remember that. In fact, when we went down there to play the Chargers, it was throwing hot dogs and everything else down at you, and it's not a fun thing to do.
By 1970, there was a waiting list for Broncos season tickets.
Jim ball game tonight.
Fans appreciated the passion that Lou Saban brought to the game.
Defense, Steve. Big play. Strong pass. Strong side.
Come on, Steve. Big one.
Saban's volatile personality was captured in some of the most memorable sideline sound ever recorded.
They're killing me, Whitey. They're killing me. I tell you, it's going to cost Dedeke, and it's going to cost Dedeke plenty.
Who didn't go in?
Dedeke! Hell no. You don't give him a break. I'd like to see him die out there. Let him go.
But Saban's team never won more than 5 games in a season, and frustration was mounting. Finally, in the 1971 opener, the man who had done so much to build the fan base lost the support of the fans by settling for a tie.
We were playing the Miami Dolphins. We were a young team, just getting started. I think we had won our first game. Lou had to get some victories, and we had an opportunity to beat him. It was down in the last minute or so, and I remember Lou sending in the plays to run the ball. We're going to run the clock out. And that was the worst mistake I think the coach had ever made, because his statement was to the press at the end of the game was, hey, a half a loaf is better than none. But the fans didn't see it that way, and the press didn't see it that way. And boy, it was the worst thing you had ever seen. You think that hot dog deal was bad. I think that half a loaf thing was even worse, because every game, can you imagine, then the stadium held 55,000 people. Other than the players' wives, everybody had to have a half a loaf of bread. And they was bombarding the field with those halves of loaves of bread.
The half-a-loaf game set the tone for a dismal season, and it was the beginning of the end for Lou Saban. He resigned as head coach in mid-November. On opening day of the 1972 season, a capacity crowd jammed into Mile High Stadium to witness the beginning of a new era in Broncos history. Denver notched a win over Houston in a game that showcased exciting new talent and a new upbeat attitude, the hallmarks of John Ralston's philosophy. Ralston came to Denver from Stanford University on the wings of back-to-back Rose Bowl victories. He believed in the power of positive thinking, and he practiced what he preached.
All right, now I gotta have that great coverage. All right, we're gonna knock one clean out of here. All right, now come on, man. Let's get a hand in here. Let's go down there and knock somebody's jock off. What do you say? Come on, let's go to work.
I'm an accredited Dale Carnegie instructor, and I'm kind of a nut on that. Certainly enthusiasm, the magic of enthusiasm is so important in coaching, because you can get that little extra edge. Now, I just happen to believe in this.
Not everyone bought into Ralston's relentless cheerleading, but few questioned his eye for talent. His first significant trade brought in quarterback Charlie Johnson, a battered veteran who had been written off by the Cardinals and Oilers. Johnson showed his mettle in his first start, leading the 1-4 Broncos against the division-leading Raiders. The Broncos smashed the Raiders, 30-23. It was their first victory over Oakland in 10 years. In mid-season, Ralston added another offensive weapon, wide receiver Haven Moses, a fifth-year man from the Bills. Moses' big playability and spectacular catches soon made him Johnson's favorite target. Charlie Johnson brought a new maturity and toughness to the Broncos' offense.
We used to kid before the game, we'd look and marvel. They'd stand him up on a table and they'd tape him, from head to toe. We call him the mummy. I mean, his body was had been ravaged over time, but he was a smart quarterback. He was a very patient quarterback, and I have to attribute my success from that point. He taught me the professional side of the game, the understanding of how you work together as a team and getting on the same page, or getting to that point, how things happen automatically. You don't have to work as hard.
But neither Johnson's leadership nor Dale Carnegie's teachings made success automatic. The Broncos won only 5 games in 1972.
No. We haven't put the parts completely together yet. We play good offense for a while, good defense for a while. Got to put both halves together.
The turning point came on Orange Monday in 1973, when Denver made its first ever appearance on Monday Night Football.
All right, now this is when you find out what kind of football team we have. Find out how badly we want to play the game. Okay.
With 41 seconds left to play and the game tied, George Blanda kicked a 49-yard field goal to give the Raiders a 23-20 lead. The Broncos had only 30 seconds to work with, but they didn't fold. Charlie Johnson engineered a 3-play drive that put Denver in field goal position with 7 seconds remaining. Jim Turner's kick was good, and the Broncos escaped defeat. In 1971, a tie game had led to Lou Saban's downfall. This time, it saved a season.
The electricity, the energy from that stadium, you could have lit up the rest of the world. It being Monday night, it being the Raiders, and the Broncos having the season that they were having, all of a sudden there was hope. If we hadn't done anything after that, then it would have been lost.
But the '73 Broncos did do something. When they beat the Chargers on the road in Week 13, they clinched a winning record, the first in franchise history. They finished 7-5-2.
When I arrived, the thing that intrigued me the most was that I knew the Broncos had never had a winning season, but the stands were full. Those two things didn't correlate. I was like, why are fans coming to see a team that doesn't win? They gave us the feeling that they truly cared no matter what the situation was.
By the time the Broncos treated Denver fans to their first winning season, Denver fans had already treated the Broncos to several years of sellouts and standing room only.
From the mid-'60s until the Broncos became a Super Bowl contender, there was a unique love affair in Denver because there was nothing else. This was a dusty old cow town, and the Broncos were Denver's first link with big-time anything.
It was in 1973, as die-hard fans got their first taste of winning, that plain vanilla Broncomania gave way to Orange Fever.
The origin of Broncomania moving into a new era was the inception of an Orange Sunday. And everybody was told to bring something orange, wear something orange. And that was one day, one Sunday. The next year, there would be another Orange Sunday, but everybody took every Sunday and made it into an Orange Sunday. It really grew in the 70s, and by 73 or 74, to look out and to say sea of orange was so absolutely true that orange became not only the team's colors, but orange became a way of life in Denver.
But John Ralston, who had led the cheers since his arrival in Denver, failed to make good on his promises.
I thought if we could improve, get a winning season the second year, there's no reason why we couldn't be in the Super Bowl the third year.
In 1976, the Broncos won 9 games but still didn't make the playoffs. Ralston had improved the team, but not enough to meet the expectations that he himself had done so much to raise.
That hurt him in the end. He kept promising the Super Bowl, kept promising that this team was going to beat the Oakland Raiders and the Kansas City Chiefs, and didn't do it.
Ironically, the players believed they could keep Ralston's promises, but not with Ralston as coach. They asked management to make a coaching change.
John Ralston took the Broncos to the next level, and he was an incredible judge of talent. He took a Rick Upchurch, who was a running back in Minnesota, and turned him into wide receiver. He became the greatest punt returner in the league over a period of about 8 to 10 years.
Rick Upchurch was a 4th-round draft pick in 1975. Tom Jackson was a 4th-round pick in '73. But Ralston's skill at picking players is best shown by his top picks, impact players all. Riley Odoms in 1972. Otis Armstrong in '73, Randy Gradishar in '74, and Lewis Wright in '75.
Looking back on it now, I believe that we made a mistake. We went to the Super Bowl the next year, but we went with John Ralston's football team. Only later on did I discover how important his contributions were to our success.
Whatever his shortcomings, John Ralston turned the tide for the Broncos and brought an end to the years of futility. In 1977, Denver's steadfast fans returned to Mile High Stadium for the 18th season of Broncos football. After another round of renovations, Mile High was finally full-grown, with a total capacity of just over 75,000. Despite the disappointments of years past, the ranks of Bronco maniacs had continued to swell. This year, the team would finally deliver a championship. An unlikely hero had arrived in the person of quarterback Craig Morton, another aging veteran looking for a chance to extend his career. He was welcomed by a team that was looking for that one missing ingredient, and the man who made it possible was Ralston's replacement, Red Miller.
Red Miller is probably one of the finest men that I've ever known, and a tremendous coach, and he's just a joy to play for. He's a real fair man. He enjoys the game. He lets people have fun, yet they know how to work for him too, and it's great to be in a situation like that.
He brought a structure. I mean, he was a hard-nosed lineman in his day, and we needed that. We needed to be pulled together. We had talent, and talent only goes so far. You have to pull it together. You have to hit it in the right direction. And I think Red was that catalyst.
Red brought that professional atmosphere to the team that Ralston was never able to do, because Ralston was more of the college rah-rah type coach. Red brought the professionalism. He also brought Craig Morton. Without him, I don't think they'd have won in 77.
Craig Morton had the bad legs, he had the scars on both knees, but he could throw the football. And he had a lot of heart. He was tough.
Early in the season, the gutsy Morton made some surprising moves. In weeks 1 through 4, bad knees and all, he converted a critical 4th down and scored 3 touchdowns. Undefeated at 4-0, the Broncos were off to their best start ever. But their Week 5 opponent had won 17 in a row. Against the Raiders, the Orange Crush defense lived up to its name, harassing Ken Stabler and snagging 7 interceptions.
Stabler in the end zone, rolling to his right, looking a flag down as the pass is intercepted at the 15. Return for a touchdown by Lewis Wright.
The game's most memorable play featured kicker Jim Turner.
42-yard try by Turner. Ball is down. It's a fake. Wees looking, throwing. Turner wide open. Catches the ball at the 15. He'll score a touchdown. The grand old man has done it.
The Broncos had knocked the Raiders from the ranks of the unbeaten and taken sole possession of first place in the AFC West. Denver's 6-0 start raised Bronco mania to a fever pitch. A trip to Mile High Stadium would never be the same. What began as a love affair with Denver's defense mushroomed into a social epidemic.
They dressed in all kinds of ways. They were totally orange, that's for sure. And then you had the barrel man that was the true Bronco mania individual.
I bleed orange. The team is family to me. My kids grew up with the Broncos. It's hard to explain, but the passion that the fans have in this town is beyond belief. And the team plays to the way the fans are cheering.
It was one of the most deafening sounds that I've ever heard, but the electricity of it all. As a player, it made you want to just get out there and play and get more out of the fans. And the more you would get out of the fans, the more you wanted to play.
After a Week 7 loss, it was time to apply Red Miller's motto, "We'll win it in the fourth quarter." A fourth down pass with less than 2 minutes to play was the clincher in San Diego. A last-second goal line stand saved a win in Kansas City. If the game was close going into the fourth quarter, the Broncos found a way to seal the deal. For 18 years, they had wandered in the desert. By the end of November, they were one win away from the promised land of the playoffs. The key to the Broncos' success in 1977 was the Orange Crush defense.
11 guys, they had that burning desire to get to the football. It was just a gut check every game, and those guys came to play. I think it was a feeling, and you can't manufacture a feeling, but it was their desire to win and lead the team.
In 1977, the Orange Crush allowed only 148 points and 18 touchdowns, franchise records that still stand after nearly 30 years. Win number 11 on the road in Houston was the clincher. The Broncos had finally made it to the playoffs. Returning home, they were met at the airport by hordes of ecstatic fans. The Oakland Raiders had just fallen to the LA Rams, making the Denver Broncos the new AFC Western Division champions.
Denver fans were just so excited to be a part of this first episode of winning. We're winning. And we're not only winning, but it looks like we may have a chance to actually do something at the end of the season.
Good afternoon from Mile High Stadium in Denver. This is Bob Martin with Larry Zimmer as the Denver Broncos meet the Pittsburgh Steelers. The first time in the history of the Bronco franchise they have ever been in a playoff game.
Christmas 1977 came a day early in Denver. The Broncos flustered Pittsburgh quarterback Terry Bradshaw, intercepting him 3 times. Denver scored 13 unanswered points in the fourth quarter to win their first ever playoff game. A week later, on a frigid day at Mile High Stadium, the Broncos faced the Raiders again in the biggest game in Denver history. The blue and orange crushed the silver and black to earn their first conference championship. The M&M connection of Craig Morton and Haven Moses hooked up for 2 touchdowns. The first, a 74-yard bomb on their second play from scrimmage. Moses' touchdown put the Broncos on top for good. For Denver, the emotion of that game transcends time.
Jumping up and down on the sidelines. The fans respond. Listen to this crowd. The Broncos on the field. It is over. The miracle has happened. The Broncos are going to the Super Bowl.
I'll tell you now, the home field helped tremendously because the fans were there and they were really there. The whole town went crazy and the whole area, they were proud. They had something to be proud of for the first time in pro sports. And this was something that was really unbelievable.
Do they believe now? Do they believe now? They wonder if they believe we're for real now. Huh? Well, I guarantee you we're for real.
Hey, listen now. 4 quarters, 60 minutes, and we're the champions. Yeah! Let's go, baby!
In 1977, the Dallas Cowboys were the best team in football. Denver was number 2.
When they found out the game or realized that the game was out of reach and we were going to lose, our fans stood up behind us and began to chant, "We love you."
After 18 years, can you believe that we're here?
I had tears running down my cheeks as I walked out of that stadium because as we walked out, we were still chanting it. We wanted to keep the Bronco mania going. We didn't want it to die just because we'd lost the Super Bowl.
One disappointing evening in New Orleans couldn't erase a season of unbounded success. Denver fans will never forget a rookie head coach who built on the will to win instilled by his predecessor, and a team that finally made good on 18 years' worth of promises. In 1978, the Denver Broncos were again a force to be reckoned with. Although they lost to the Steelers in the playoffs, they won the AFC West to the delight of their colorful fans.
I bleed orange. It's a 24/7, 365 days a year. I'm a Bronco fan, and I let everybody know I am a Bronco fan.
Some loyalty is shown in strange ways.
Been a bet with my brother. He bet me $10 that I wouldn't wear nothing but that barrel. That was a one-time deal, and they said, "Oh no, you got to do it again."
But the Broncos under Red Miller couldn't do it again and would never achieve the success they had in 1977. Miller became increasingly frustrated.
This places you in next week's game, then it becomes even more critical with Oakland.
Right. You want me to comment on that?
Miller would coach Denver only 4 years. In 1981, owner Edgar Kaiser replaced Miller with Cowboys assistant coach Dan Reeves. In 1983, Reeves was handed his quarterback of the future, a fresh-faced kid named John Elway. Elway was in demand by both pro football leagues, as well as Major League Baseball.
All 3 of those leagues were looking at him as some form of salvation to some degree. John Elway was really a cartoonist dream come true. We want big ears. We want gigantic noses, great jowls, or we want big teeth. And of course, when John Elway came along, he was a dream come true.
John Elway was a dream come true for every team he played for. In high school, he was a star football and baseball player.
Elway's back in the end zone with the football and throwing way downfield.
What's it going to be, football? It's going to be both. I'm not sure in what, though. But you're going to college? Yeah. Whereabouts? Stanford. Yes.
His record-breaking years at Stanford made him a surefire #1 pick in the NFL draft. But Baltimore, a team he had little desire to play for, held the first pick.
Baltimore selects as the first choice in the draft quarterback John Elway of Stanford.
It was a great honor, definitely, to be drafted #1 in the NFL draft. We had been in discussions with him 2 and 3 months before the draft that I was not going to play in Baltimore, that if that came to it, I was going to play baseball for the Yankees, and I was fortunate to have an option.
He was very serious about not playing in Baltimore. Had they not made a deal with Denver, I think he would have played baseball.
The Colts traded Elway to the Broncos.
I was saying, God, I hope this goes and plays football, because if he does, I'm out of a job.
I was actually the first guy to have a choice, to do something else. So I guess that's why I became notorious in that way. But, it's turned out to be the right move. I'm a 23-year-old kid coming out of college where, I was still, I was a football player, but I was still a student there and had a bunch of buddies. And all of a sudden you step out and they pay you good money to play football. And all of a sudden the expectations level of you raise tenfold. And the world became a lot smaller for me because I couldn't go out and be the kid that I had been. And that all changed in 1 week when we went to camp.
Ace left topo, double A 36 OT on it.
They really followed John. I mean, they had the Elway watch. They were concerned about what he ate for lunch and what he was doing.
Everything that John did was reported.
It was crazy. I mean, it was, you documented his hair getting cut. You documented, his walking to and from, the dorm room to the cafeteria.
The passion that the fans have in this town is beyond belief.
Go to training camp the next day, every move, what you eat, getting a haircut is a big deal. And it has a tendency, little things like that, a lot of times get blown out of proportion and turn into a lot bigger deals than they really are.
My expectations were higher than the expectations that people were putting on me. Therefore, I had to live up to my own expectations and not theirs.
It's interesting when a young man with the publicity that an Elway has had, even the football teams, you can tell that it's got their attention. Everybody's craning their neck to see what he's going to do.
First snap I ever took. I mean, Jack Lambert's staring across me in Pittsburgh, my first regular season, and Jack Lambert's across, playing middle linebacker, and no teeth. He's snarling, he's spitting, he's yelling at me, and I'm going, God, you can have all the money back. You can just blink me out of here right now. I'll go be an accountant. But that was pretty intimidating, seeing him and realizing what the NFL was all about. But there's no question, that first year it was frustrating.
Nothing comes easy in the NFL, and while Elway may have been hailed as a savior, it was he who often needed saving. From the beginning of his Broncos career, however, his athletic skills were evident. He could scramble to make plays. He could catch the ball. And he had perhaps the strongest arm the NFL had ever seen.
He has the strongest arm I've ever seen in my life. I have never seen a guy with that kind of arm in my life.
In his rookie year, all those skills culminated in a comeback against the team that had picked, then traded him.
4th down and 2 Broncos. Elway is back. Here comes the safety blitz.
It was an easy pass for me. I just dumped in the ball, and he did the rest of the work from there.
Will Height at the 10. Will Height at the 5. Will Height to the goal line. Touchdown! 4th and 2, and the Broncos get the touchdown to go ahead.
Being able to do that my rookie year helped my confidence, and plus it was a great feeling to do against the Colts.
3 years later, Elway guided his team to the AFC Championship.
And the dog bones were everywhere, of course, during that game. I just thought, Superman kind of picking up the big dog bone was kind of appropriate at the time. And the end zones were flailing them all over the place. They were, all over.
But against the Dogs, the Broncos were underdogs.
This is what we've been working for a long time. Let's go out and have some fun now. Let's get active from the start.
For John, going into his 4th year, not winning a playoff game, and people saying, "Hey, you can't win a playoff, and you can't get to the Super Bowl." Da 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 da.
The Browns took a 7-0 lead after a Bernie Kosar touchdown pass. The legs of John Elway carried Denver back into the game, His run set up a touchdown, and the Broncos gained a 10-7 advantage. After 2 Cleveland field goals and another Kosar touchdown toss, the Broncos trailed 20-13. The game appeared to be over after the ensuing kickoff was downed at the Broncos' own 1.5-yard line with less than 6 minutes left in regulation.
As that drive started, looking at John's eyes, that fierce look of determination came there.
It's total concentration. I can remember the only thing that has kind of gone down in the history books was Keith Bishop saying, you know, we got him right where we want him.
Nope. About the 1.5. Still 5 minutes to go, but they need something out of this drive. Come on, Johnny!
Had 1st and 10 our own 2, and 5 minutes to go in the game, and we needed a touchdown just to get it in overtime.
And with every completed pass, John became more confident.
All right, Sammy, baby! All right!
Once we got a couple first downs, and then, you know, I think that at that point in time, we felt like we were rolling.
Empty waggle right. Mitchell, the H-back. Elway to pass on 1st down. The pass for Sewell. Got it and keeps it at the 48-yard line, and was he hammered. Now they are faced with a 3rd and 18.
In 2-minute situations where you got to get lucky, and there's no question we were lucky on this situation because the crowd was so loud.
42 seconds to go. Broncos at the Cleveland 5. 3rd down and a yard.
Come on, guys. Come on. Stick it to him, baby. Stick it to him.
The snap to Elway. The look. The throw. Touchdown to Mark Jackson. 98.5-yard drive.
I threw that one hard, and Harrison's hand just missed the ball when it was going through there. That was in my 4th year in the league. And so that was really kind of my coming out party. I mean, that got me over the hump as far as people respected me as a player.
The game went into overtime, where Elway led the Broncos 60 yards to set up a Rich Karlis field goal attempt.
This will be a 32-yard try to win it in overtime.
I was able to fulfill some of the expectations that people thought of me when I came into the league. For us to be able to start on our own 2 and go 98 to get it in overtime, something I'll always remember.
We actually are going to the Super Bowl. That was the ultimate.
I got to be honest with you, I haven't been back to Cleveland since the drive. And actually, I'm still wondering if, because when I went there, the fire hydrants are all painted orange with my numbers on them. I'm just wondering if the paint's worn off yet.
He was trying to do it all himself. Elway was the whole team, and unfortunately, at that point in time, he really didn't have, much of a supporting cast around him.
If it hadn't been for John, we would have never been there. I mean, he was the catalyst.
Elway may have been the catalyst, but the results in his first 3 Super Bowls were cataclysmic. Denver managed to take a 10-9 lead over the Giants in the first half of Super Bowl 21 before things fell apart.
In the case of the Giants, out in the Rose Bowl, I think they faced a better team.
Parcells had convinced that team, even though they got all the way to the Super Bowl doing things one way, to turn it completely around, go the other way. And by the time we figured it out, it was too late.
The fans remained loyal through it all.
They'd given us a good season. They'd made us proud. We were a Cinderella team. We weren't even supposed to be there.
A 56-yard bomb on Denver's first play from scrimmage in Super Bowl 22 helped give the Broncos a 10-0 lead over the Redskins.
I can't explain what happened in that game.
What happened was Doug Williams, who threw 4 touchdown passes in one of the greatest performances in Super Bowl history.
We know this was a good team, but we keep going in front of the world and looking like idiots, you know, and sticking our elbow in our soup right in front of the Queen, you know. We know we're better than this, but we were really ready for losing. We were ready to lose again.
Well, we lost 3 in 4 years. Not only did we get beat, we got embarrassed.
Against the 49ers in Super Bowl 24, the Broncos never had a chance.
The 49ers were definitely better. I mean, the score is probably indicative of how much better they were.
I think that we just got in some bad matchups. We got in situations where we were taken advantage of.
Now, John, you know, yeah, you can get us to the Super Bowl, but you can't win the big one, you know, so that went on for a long time.